A child vanishes. Her mother doesn't call the police. Instead, she goes to clubs, gets a tattoo, and tells everyone the nanny has her. We begin with the disappearance of 2-year-old Kaylee Anthony in June 2008 and the events that unfold in the 31 days before her grandmother, Cindy Anthony, places a frantic 911 call. What follows is a twisted tale of lies, confusion, and a smell in the trunk of a car that haunts investigators to this day. We unpack Casey Anthony's erratic behavior, including her fabricated job at Universal Studios, the non existent nanny named Zanny, and the trail of deception that leaves police and the public grasping for answers. Cadaver dogs, disturbing forensics, and Casey's own silence build the tension leading to her arrest. This is Scarlet Tavern.
Yeah.
All right, that was kind of anticlimactic clink.
Well, I don't have as long of arms as I wish I had.
So, Casey Anthony. We decided to jump into Casey Anthony because of her recent resurfacing. If you have been living under a rock, Casey Anthony decided to join TikTok a few months ago.
March of 2025 of this year.
And tried to become an advocate for her daughter. And an advocate for people wrongly accused and blah, 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 blah. Well, the internet did not like that.
As they shouldn't have.
And in less than a month, Casey Anthony was banned from TikTok. And now she's nowhere to be found again. So, in honor of that, we are going to talk about Casey Anthony. We were actually never had the plans to do this, at least now, like right now. But with this popping up, we decided to push Toy Box Killer out and push Casey Anthony in, and then we'll get Toy Box Killer after this. So this is 4 fucking parts because there's so much to it.
So originally it was only supposed to be 2 parts. And then I'm like, there is way too much information for 2 parts. And I made it 4.
Yeah. So
I've both dreaded and I can't say look forward to it. This is definitely one of the more sensational cases of our times, but the subject matter always made me hesitant because it involves a child.
I was a sophomore in high school because this was 2008. I was a sophomore in high school.
Yeah. I was a junior.
You were in the military already, weren't you?
What year was this?
2008. July. She disappeared in June.
I was in training.
June 16th.
Yeah.
So, I would have been all right. I would have been in Lackland already at that point.
Yeah, so again, this is if you were born in 2000, you would have been 8 years old when this happened. You probably remember seeing this on the TV somewhere.
Or heard your parents talking about it.
Like this is probably one of the biggest cases of our time.
Yeah.
You will hear us poke fun at Casey Anthony. It's not taking anything away from Kaylee, of course. Because this is absolutely tragic. As a father, I could not imagine this. And how old was she when she disappeared?
So she was born in 2005.
Okay, so she'd be 20 years old now. Just think about that.
Yeah.
She'd be 20 years old if her mother wasn't a piece of shit.
Yeah.
So we will be making fun of Casey Anthony. This is also my home state. This is Florida. She's from Orlando. So, yeah.
These first 2 parts are primarily going to be more about Kaylee. And then the last 2 parts are more geared towards Casey.
Yeah. All right. So, to the neighbors on Hope Spring Drive in East Orlando, the Anthony family seemed like any other working class household. Lawn neatly trimmed, pool out back, a granddaughter laughing in the driveway. George and Cindy Anthony had lived in the same house for years, raising 2 children and settling into what looked like the suburban ideal. But behind the well-kept appearance, the family was tangled in years of tension, silence, and dysfunction. Cracks that would soon shatter under pressure. Cindy Anthony was, by many accounts, the matriarch, organized, firm, and often controlling. She had a no nonsense demeanor honed from years of work as a registered nurse. Um, and she believes Cindy worked at Orlando Health. Uh, Cindy took immense pride in her home, her family, and especially in her role as a grandmother to Kaylee. She expected things to be done her way, and when they weren't, conflicts brewed quickly. She often took on the emotional labor for the household, juggling work, family, and crisis control. But her efforts to maintain appearances sometimes came at the expense of confronting deeper truths, especially when it came to her daughter. So, Cindy Anthony, she reminds me a lot of my grandmother. My grandmother is 100% German. So, very strict, very by the book. It's her way or the highway. But when it came to the grandkids, she would discipline them, but she'd love them. And that's really what this is. When it comes to the parents, that's another story, especially when you're as shitty as Casey. And we'll get into the shittiness of Casey. She was a mother that was a fucking party animal and shouldn't have been.
Yeah, to the point where I believe that by some of the research I did, that Cindy was the primary caretaker of Kaylee, and at times saying, "Oh, I'm more of a mother than you are to your own daughter."
I remember, and I believe it came out that during trial, all of that stuff, that they believed that at one point, and this may have been the trigger, that at one point Cindy had said, "I'm going to take custody of Kaylee." And a lot of people think that that was that trigger point for whatever Casey did, because of course, still don't know. So a lot of people think that that's the trigger point because she said, "Well, I'm taking care of her already. She might as well legally be mine." So, and not in saying this in a bad way, so I can benefit from it because she would get state benefits.
Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just that. I think it was that she truly loved her granddaughter.
Oh, she did. Very much so. She was a wreck when she was gone.
That I don't think she wanted the benefits from the state. She just wanted to, like, her granddaughter to have that loving, stable home that she wasn't getting with Casey.
Yeah. So George Anthony, Cindy's husband, in contrast, had a more subdued and complicated presence in the family. Former law enforcement officer who worked for Orlando PD,
I believe. I believe it was actually Ohio. It wasn't in Orlando. He worked more as security in Orlando.
Who had bounced between jobs over the years, including security work and car sales. George was described by friends and relatives as reserved, even passive. He had periods of deep depression and anxiety, worsened by financial instability and the weight of unresolved conflict within the home. His career path had never quite stabilized, and the traditional role of provider had long slipped away. At home, George often deferred to Cindy, particularly when it came to parenting decisions or family disagreements. He was a beta, which is odd for a cop. Most cops are very much alphas. Casey Anthony, the youngest child of George and Cindy, grew up in the middle of this dynamic, a girl caught between emotional extremes, high expectations, and unclear boundaries. Childhood friends of Casey recalled that she was charming and social, but also known to lie, even when the truth would have served her just as well. Her relationship with Cindy was especially fraught. Cindy alternated between overbearing and protective, often blurring the lines between discipline and control. Friends noticed that Casey rarely faced real consequences at home. When she was caught lying or skipping school, the issues were usually smoothed over or redirected, not confronted. Her older brother, Lee Anthony, added another layer of complexity. Though not as publicly involved in the early stages of the case, Lee's role in the family dynamics has been the subject of speculation. He and Casey had a complicated sibling relationship, distant at times and uncomfortably close at others. During the trial, allegations about inappropriate behavior surfaced, claims Lee denied and which were never proven, but the discomfort they introduced into the family narrative never quite faded. And he, since the trial, he has decided to disappear. He kind of resurfaced when Casey resurfaced, but I believe he's just disappeared again.
Yeah. So Casey's father, George, was born in Ohio. And then from the 70s through the 80s, he worked as a police officer and detective in Ohio before leaving law enforcement. So it was shortly before, or a year before, Cindy and him married in Niles, Ohio.
Yeah. So, yeah, Niles is like...
I thought it was only a couple hours from us because I kind of looked it up.
It is. It's just east of Cleveland.
Okay.
And so he would have worked during the tornado. So there was a huge tornado in 1985. It was an F5. It was during the United States Canada tornado outbreak.
Oh.
There was like 44 people.
Well, he would have
44 tornadoes.
So he would have still been in Ohio, but not a police officer. They moved to Orlando in 1989. And then he worked a variety of security jobs in Florida.
Yeah, 9 people were killed in the tornado and 250.
Massive tornado. Yeah.
The 44 tornadoes in 10 hours between the United States and Canada. It's crazy. So, one of the most telling examples of the family's fractured communication came years before Kaylee's disappearance. When Casey was in high school, she told her parents she was about to graduate with her class. The family organized a party. Her grandparents came down, but at the ceremony, Casey didn't walk. She hadn't earned enough credits to graduate. Rather than confronting her about it, the family, particularly Cindy, seemed to gloss over the lie. This wasn't an isolated incident, it was a pattern. Casey would lie, and the family, unwilling to rupture the image of normalcy, would quietly absorb the falsehood. Despite the dysfunction, the Anthony home wasn't joyless. Kaylee brought light to the house, and for a while seemed to stitch the family together. Cindy doted on her granddaughter, treating her almost as a second chance at motherhood. George was Kaylee's playmate, softer and more emotionally present with her than he often was with Casey. Even Casey, despite her frequent absence from the home and social life, appeared to genuinely love her daughter. But that love was filtered through an unstable emotional environment marked by control, denial, and silence. By the time Kaylee was born in 2005, the family was already grappling with the fallout of Casey's deceit, her ambiguous relationships, and her lack of direction. The identity of Kaylee's father was never publicly confirmed. Casey gave multiple names over time, including Jesse Grund, her former fiance, and a young man who had supposedly died in a car crash. Neither panned out. Jesse even took a paternity test that confirmed he was not Kaylee's biological father. Yet he remained involved in her early life, calling himself Kaylee's father until he and Casey ultimately split. The secrecy around the father's identity only added to the instability in the household. Some interpreted it as another example of Casey's habitual lying, while others saw it as a symptom of deeper issues, possibly trauma that had never been addressed. George and Cindy, for their part, seemed to toggle between enabling Casey's behavior and trying to control it, often switching strategies depending on the level of crisis. Finances were another ongoing source of stress. The Anthonys had filed for bankruptcy in 1997, and by 2008, they were still struggling. George couldn't hold steady employment, and Cindy was supporting the household on her nursing income, which in the early 2000s was still really shitty, unless she's like a nurse manager or charge nurse. She's not making
Yeah, they never specified what her level in the hospital was.
Yeah, so without disclosing the numbers, my mom is a nursing manager. So there's a difference between charge nurse and nursing manager. So charge nurse is in charge of one section for that shift. My mom is a nursing manager, so she has every nurse on that shift underneath her. Not just her section, not just oncology. It's multiple sections because my mom is an oncology nurse. And my mom makes decent money. And granted, so, and again, my mom works in Florida, but I believe again that Cindy worked for Orlando Health. I don't know if we know where she worked, but I believe she worked for Orlando Health, and Orlando Health is one of the largest hospitals there now, aside from Cleveland Clinic, which is where my mom works. So the economic strain added pressure to an already volatile home life. George reportedly pawned belongings at times. Arguments about money and Casey's failure to contribute meaningfully became increasingly common. And yet, despite these cracks, the Anthonys maintained a strong outward appearance. They were polite to neighbors, friendly in the community, and fiercely protective of their family image. Cindy, especially, worked to keep the family looking put together. She presented the Anthony household as stable, supportive, and loving. This image, part truth, part illusion, would become a key point of contrast as the investigation into Kaylee's disappearance unfolded.
Did it ever say why George ever left the police department?
Mm-mm.
Never said. I mean,
so it seems like because he left in probably 1980 or something, because he was married prior to Cindy.
Okay.
In 1980, he got divorced. He married Cindy in 1981. So I'm assuming that either he left to try to fix his previous marriage, or he left because Cindy didn't want him to be a police officer.
It just seems really odd because, I mean, even back then, policing was a pretty decent job, and I believe, at least back then, Florida still paid decently back then. So I'm a little shocked / interested. He just never went into law enforcement in Florida.
There's no specific reasons.
Especially if he was a detective.
Yes. Cindy's former employer was I'm going to probably pronounce this wrong, and I'm so sorry. Gentiva Health Services.
I can't help but wonder if maybe George left under somewhat of a cloud, maybe.
Maybe.
Because, I mean, a detective, even from relatively small town Ohio, would still be, I would think, would be very valuable to, like you said, the Orlando area. I would think Orlando PD would have scooped him right up if he applied for it. That's the whole thing.
He might not have applied because at the same time, like a couple years later, because they were still in Ohio until 1989. They already had Lee, and I believe Casey as well.
That's why she didn't make that much money. Gentiva is a hospice house. It's hospice, palliative care, home health care, advanced illness care. I know where this is.
Yeah, so it was probably that he now had kids and didn't want to go back into the police department.
She worked in Baldwin Park. Okay. Yeah, so she was a hospice nurse, more than likely. I mean, she could have been part of the palliative care. It's all the same thing. When you work at a hospice house, you kind of deal with everything. It's within this environment, loving, yes, but also rigid, secretive, and emotionally erratic, that Kaylee was born and raised for the first 3 years of her life. And it's within this house that the silence of those 31 days, the absence of questions, the suppression of alarm, would later seem deafening as a truth that eventually emerged. Sunday, June 15th, 2008, was Father's Day. The Anthony family gathered in their Orlando home for what would later be remembered as the final time they were all together with Kaylee. Cindy prepared a special dinner, and photos from that day, later entered into evidence, captured fleeting moments of familial closeness. In one, Kaylee smiles in a backyard photo with her grandfather, George. It looks like a perfectly ordinary, most idyllic afternoon. A warm Florida evening, a family meal, a toddler in pigtails laughing near the pool. But below the surface, tensions were simmering, particularly between Cindy and Casey. The fight that reportedly broke out that night has become one of the most scrutinized moments in the timeline. According to several later accounts, including testimony and interviews, a bitter argument erupted between mother and daughter. Cindy allegedly accused Casey of being an unfit mother, even threatening to seek custody of Kaylee herself, like I said. Mm-hmm. The conflict was the culmination of months of building frustration. Casey's partying, her lack of steady employment, her evasive explanations about where she and Kaylee were staying. Cindy had been taking on more and more responsibility for Kaylee, and in her view, Casey was failing. What exactly was said that night is unclear. Some witnesses, including Casey's defense team, would later claim that the argument escalated to the point of Cindy physically grabbing Casey by the throat, an allegation Cindy denied. Still, whatever happened after dinner was significant enough that by the following morning, June 16th, Casey packed up Kaylee and left the house without any real explanation. And keep in mind, she was known to do this. She and Kaylee would disappear for days at a time. And nobody would know where they're staying or anything like that. And then she would come back home. And nobody has any idea. God knows what she was putting that baby, what scenes and locations she was putting that baby into.
Because she was known as a party animal.
Well, and a lot of people think she was a druggie. There's no evidence of that. We don't have any evidence of her being a druggie because she was drug tested and all of that stuff. But some people think she was doing drugs. That Monday, June 16th, would become a day dissected down to the hour in courtrooms and documentaries. According to the phone records, Casey was texting with friends early that morning and made several calls to her parents, one of which lasted more than a minute. None of which lasted more than a minute. She later drove to her boyfriend Tony Lazzaro's apartment. Tony Lazzaro, big Italians community in Orlando, where surveillance video from the conflict showed her arriving alone that afternoon. What's chilling is that this day, the last Kaylee was ever seen alive, passed without disruption. No reports, no alarms, no immediate red flags. Around 2:49 p.m., Casey's cell phone pinged near the area of her parents' home. At 4:11 p.m., there was a gap in activity on her phone that some investigators would later interpret as a possible window for something sinister. So when we say that there was a gap in activity, that typically means her phone was shut off. So your cell phone pings a cell tower every 10 minutes. Just to maintain location, maintain cell signal. It pings every 10 minutes. So if you have a cell phone on, if I'm walking down the street, every 10 minutes, you can see where I am, no matter what. At 4:11, there's a gap. If there's a gap, that means that in Orlando, where they live in Orlando, there's no remoteness of it. No. They live in the city. A suburb in the city, but in the city. So there's cell phone towers. So in order for there to be that gap, it means she shut her phone off. And this is 2008. This is like early iPhones, all of that. So there was no way to shut off your data. There wasn't really like an airplane mode. There was an airplane mode, but because the first iPhone had it, because I had the first iPhone. That if that ages us, that'll tell you something. We owned phones before iPhone existed.
My first phone was a fucking flip phone.
Yeah, I had a slide up phone.
That was my second one.
It was orange and black. Yeah. And my mom got it for me because my parents were split. And you would take in the middle button was the internet button. And you would accidentally hit it and you would go, shit.
Yep, I remember that.
Back up. Because, kids, back in the day, we had to pay for the internet on our phones.
And it was expensive.
It was expensive as fuck. So you would go, shit. And then to get ringtones, kids, we would play music on the radio and hold up your phone to the speaker to record it. And then set that as your ringtone.
And tell everybody in the car or in the house.
Nobody talk. And you would record it. Okay, we're good. And then you would restart the song so everybody could sing it. But in the moment, no one outside the Anthony household knew anything was wrong. Casey herself in those hours appeared calm and composed. She spent part of the day with Tony Lazzaro, watching movies and behaving normally, according to his later statements. There was no mention of Kaylee, no sign of distress. And yes, I'm going to say his name that way every time. He's a mobster. From that point forward, Kaylee would never again be seen by anyone outside the immediate family. What happened that day between Casey and Kaylee remains one of the most disturbing unanswered questions in modern criminal history. Did Kaylee drown in the backyard pool, as the defense would later claim? Was there foul play? An accident covered up? The pool ladder had been reported out of place by George on the afternoon of June 16th, something he would later testify to during the trial. The family's pool, which Kaylee loved to swim in, was not secured by a child gate. Could that detail have signaled a tragic accident, or was it a red herring? Now, I will say Florida now has a law because of Casey. Florida now has a law that if you own a pool, there has to be a netting around it. If you own a pool and you have children, by law, there has to be that big netting around it, and it has to be secured because of this case, because they claim that she drowned and that she was unattended.
Yeah, and then we'll later on we'll get into Kaylee's law.
Yeah, so this was very significant. So if you go to Florida and you see somebody with kids and they have a pool, they're going to have the big netting around it, or access to it will be restricted. Like there will be, like even if you have a sliding door that goes out to a porch, even though that you have that sliding door that locks, you still have to have a netting around it.
That makes sense because
or a gate.
Yeah, that makes sense because children can easily unlock those.
That is a law. If you get found not doing that, you will go to jail for it. Adding to the mystery was George Anthony's testimony that on the morning of June 16th, he saw Casey and Kaylee leaving the house together. He said Kaylee was wearing her favorite backpack and looked perfectly fine. That would become the last claimed sighting of the toddler by any family member. George said Casey gave him a casual goodbye, nothing unusual. But that detail has been hotly debated. Did George truly see Kaylee that morning, or was his memory fogged by the trauma that followed? Was that goodbye a routine exit or a final departure? In the days that followed, Casey was not missing. She was out with friends, at clubs, staying at Tony's apartment.
Tony.
To her parents, she gave a carefully constructed series of lies. Kaylee, she claimed, was with a nanny named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, a woman Cindy and George had never met, but had heard of through Casey's stories. Casey said they were staying at the beach, or at the nanny's apartment, or at Disney. The story shifted as needed, but there was always a reason Kaylee wasn't available for a call or a visit. That explanation might have seemed flimsy to most, but it worked for a while. Cindy, who had become accustomed to Casey's evasiveness, didn't press as hard as some might expect. This wasn't the first time Casey had made things up or disappeared for a few days. In her mind, it was frustrating but not terrifying. Still, the silence began to grow louder. Cindy made repeated efforts to see Kaylee, but was deflected again and again. Over the next month, there would be dozens of calls between mother and daughter. Cindy grew increasingly concerned. She asked questions. She demanded answers, but Casey, always agile with excuses, kept her at bay. And George? He seemed to recede during this period. Later court records would show that his presence in the home was emotionally distant at best. Some believe he was trying to avoid a renewed explosion of conflict between his wife and daughter. Others argue that George, struggling with his own emotional state, was simply unaware of how serious things had become. There's one small but haunting moment that foreshadowed what would come. Neighbors later reported that the Anthony's backyard, once busy with sounds of Kaylee playing, had grown eerily quiet. The toys were untouched, and the pool sat still. The world had not yet realized that a 2-year-old girl had disappeared, but inside the Anthony home, the walls were starting to close in. The final day anyone could say they truly saw Kaylee Marie Anthony alive had passed without alarm. No Amber Alert, no missing posters, just 31 days of silence waiting to be broken. And Amber Alert is in Florida is a missing child. It's different in every state. They call it something different.
Yeah.
But
I think
Alert
typically it is
Florida.
Amber Alert, because I know in Wisconsin, New York, and I want to say Boston, it's all Amber Alert.
We have another one. I forget what it's called, but it's the guy that does America's Most Wanted.
Oh, yes. Oh God, I cannot.
Yeah,
Mike Walsh.
Yeah, he's a dick. I met him. So he's from Florida, and his son went missing.
Yeah,
he's found murdered, I believe.
Yes, his head cut off.
Yes, it was.
His head was found in a ditch. Yes,
it was horrible.
So there is another one for his son, but his other son is actually taking over America's Most Wanted.
Oh, really?
His oldest.
That's
he had another child.
Yeah,
he had another one after that one. So yeah, he's taking over. But when I met him, he was a dick. He was at our mall because he lives in my hometown.
Yeah, because I know in New York there's also another one for elderly.
Yeah,
called Silver.
Well, that's everywhere. That's
universal. They actually put a silver alert on my.
On Ben.
No. It was my grandfather's cousin?
So it would be your cousin.
Yeah,
I don't remember.
Like second cousin, I guess. I don't know what the nomenclature is, but
your second cousin is your parents' cousins.
I don't know what my grandfather's cousin would be, like a third cousin.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but he was still, very. I don't say we were close. I only really met him when I was younger, but he had a silver alert. He had dementia, and they found him on the highway between Jamestown and Cleveland. It was pretty scary. I remember them saying where he's missing.
Yeah, your mom called you for that one.
Well, she let me know. Of course, I'm like, I don't know if you remember so and so. I was like, yeah, I remember him. What's going on with him? Well, he has dementia. And he went missing, but we just found him. And I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. So yeah, that's a silver alert. So
when Casey Anthony left her parents' house on June 16, 2008, Kaylee was with her. That's what George Anthony testified under oath. He remembered seeing his granddaughter with her tiny backpack, heading out for what looked like a normal day. What followed was anything but normal. For the next 31 days, Kaylee Anthony, a lively and joyful 2-year-old, would not be seen by anyone. Not friends, not family, not neighbors. Yet there was no missing persons report, no media alerts, no searches in the woods, because as far as everyone outside Casey's orbit knew, Kaylee was just fine. And that illusion was meticulously maintained.
I don't know how do you not go?
Like, you can see, it bugs the fuck out of me.
For you especially, but even me, just my intellectual mind is like, how did nobody? And I understand the whole Cindy saying, "Oh, Casey would do this." It's like, yeah, but there's a difference between
a few days and 31.
A month. That's a month, yeah. And I don't understand. Like, even I'm a 36-year-old man. My mother will still text me every now and again, like at least a couple times a week, and be like, "You alive? Yeah, I'm still here." I can't even imagine. And my mother, when I was a kid, when I understood, my mother watched me like a hawk.
Yeah.
I don't think there was ever a point in my life where I didn't do the whole kid go to summer camp thing. I just never really wanted to, but I just cannot comprehend in my mind how this little girl went unseen for 31 days and no one in her family really did anything. Like, again, a week. I can see a week, just given the chaotic nature of her mother. But even if it was a lull thing, I can see a week because it's a little girl, the busy and everything. But 31 days, I can't. Yeah. I just don't understand it.
So Casey spent that month fabricating an elaborate reality. One where Kaylee was supposedly being cared for by a nanny named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. According to Casey, Zanny the nanny had been watching Kaylee for months, giving her time and space to work and socialize. In reality, Zanny never existed, at least not in the way Casey described her. She told her parents that she and Kaylee were staying at Zanny's apartment complex. At one point, she even said they were on vacation at the beach. When Cindy asked to talk to Kaylee or see her, Casey always had an excuse. Zanny took her out shopping. She was napping. They were at Disney. Casey's lies were not careless. They were surgical. She constructed detailed, believable stories tailored to the person she was speaking to. And when people asked too many questions, she distanced herself. Meanwhile, behind the curtain, Casey was living a very different life. During those 31 days, Casey stayed primarily with her boyfriend, Tony Lazaro, a college student who lived near Full Sail University.
That's a university?
Yeah.
It just seems like a made-up name.
Full Sail? It's a
sailing college?
No, it's a performing arts, like mostly drawing and stuff like that.
Well,
it's a very, very good college.
Oh, the name was.
If you grew up in Florida, you would hear the ads for Full Sail all the time.
Just the name of it was like Full Sail.
Yeah, I mean it is right on the water. So, surveillance footage from Tony's apartment complex showed Casey entering and exiting multiple times, always alone. Kaylee was never seen. Tony later told investigators that Casey never mentioned Kaylee during this time. She said the child was with the nanny and he didn't press further. To Tony and his friends, Casey appeared carefree, even flirtatious. She went clubbing with friends, danced in contests at Fusion Lounge, and even got a tattoo that read Bella Vita, beautiful life in Italian.
Because I believe the Anthonys are Italian.
Yes, they are.
Anthony is in the.
Wow, you said it right.
Fuck off.
Golf clap moment? That's a golf clap.
That probably on audio did not sound like a golf clap.
No.
That probably sounded like something else. Fusion Lounge, I believe it still exists, actually.
Oh, sure.
But how does Tony not press further? Like, where's Kaylee? Like, she can't constantly be with the nanny.
I mean, think about it though. I'll tell you from a guy's perspective, and he is a college student who is dating, hooking up, or whatever the relationship with a. I'm just saying. Objectively, Casey Anthony was very good looking back then. I mean, again, I wouldn't touch her even if I was single, given all the drama alone. But he doesn't care about that. I'm sure, like you said, he did ask, like, "Hey, where's your kid?" She's somewhere with the nanny. It's fine. Okay, it's not his kid. Yeah. He's only got one thing on his mind, and it ain't a kid.
Yeah, but it's still weird that, like, his friends or him who knew Casey had a daughter being like, okay.
Did they? He did. Did they?
Also, again, I don't
remember she never talked about her.
Yeah. That's true.
Again, I don't think he really cared.
No.
Again, he's got other things on his mind. As far as he's concerned,
he's a fucking college student.
Yeah, at an art school.
Yeah.
He doesn't care. He's got a hottie girlfriend who's down to party 24/7.
I will say this, for as fucking psycho as she was, Casey Anthony's was very attractive.
Yeah.
I mean, like, did you actually see the TikTok that
yeah.
She's still...
Yeah, she's still great.
She's aged very well, again, but she's a, as far as I'm concerned, evil scum, and I probably, if I had a flamethrower, I'd hit her with that, just because.
Jokingly.
Of course.
No, not jokingly. I would kill her.
But, again, he doesn't care. Again, as far as he knows, whatever she says is gospel. Oh, she's with a nanny. Oh, he's with a family. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yeah,
I don't care. It's not my kid.
So, for photos from that period, many of which later were introduced in court, show Casey smiling, laughing, holding drinks. There is no visible trace of grief or stress, and yet her daughter was missing. The deception was not limited to her parents. Casey also lied to friends, claiming she had a job at Universal Studios. One day, she even led Tony and a friend to the gates of the park, pretending to use her employee badge. She explained away her job title, work hours, and coworkers, all of it completely fictitious. Later, when detectives asked her to prove she worked there, Casey confidently drove them through Universal's gates until she had to admit halfway through the building that she had been lying the entire time. I remember that video. There's body cam footage of that, and I remember that video surfacing. You can still probably find it. If we find it, we'll post it on socials. But yeah, that was really significant. You see her walk through so fucking confident, goes all the way through Universal, like into the employee stuff, and then halfway through goes, I don't work here.
I really, just from what is just touching getting into it at the beginning of it, I'm really seeing signs, what I think are signs of a narcissistic personality. They're just, the line is so nonchalant. Like, it's just like, yeah, whatever. Okay, yeah. I work here. Come on, let's go. And then right to the point when it's like, okay, I either have to prove it or don't. It's like, oh yeah, I was lying.
Yeah,
I was lying. The fact that she lying to her parents and friends, okay, fine, whatever. But for the fact that she could confidently lie to police officers without even flinching is
that's ballsy.
Crazy.
That's
ballsy.
That's either years of experience in the criminal world, or you're just that naturally much of a narcissist that you just like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. I don't care.
Even when directly confronted, Casey didn't fold easily. She spun new stories to cover the old ones. For every inconsistency, she had an explanation. Some of her friends noted that she seemed more committed to maintaining the narrative than finding Kayde. Mm-hmm. Her best friend at the time, Amy Huizenga, was manipulated just as thoroughly. Casey stayed at Amy's apartment frequently during that month and even stole from her. Amy later discovered Casey had used her checkbook to forge multiple checks, spending hundreds of dollars on food, clothes, and gas. The betrayal was shocking, not just because of the theft, but because it revealed how easily Casey could exploit the people closest to her.
Who writes a check for gas? What gas station takes a check for gas?
She probably wrote herself the check.
Oh.
And said cash.
And then cashed it.
Oh, I was just...
Because that was common back then.
Yeah. And I mean...
Cash.
Oh.
And a lot of gas stations back then also were still taking checks because not everybody had like a debit or credit card like they do now.
I've never heard of a gas station taking a check.
Yeah. By early July, a new detail emerged that would later haunt investigators. The Pontiac Sunfire, the car Casey had been driving, had been towed and impounded. On July 15th, George Anthony went to retrieve it. What he found there would send shockwaves through the family. When George opened the car, he immediately noticed a powerful odor. He would later describe it as the unmistakable smell of human decomposition. Keep in mind, George was a detective.
He probably knew that.
In Ohio. He knows dead bodies.
If Niles is outside of Cleveland,
he knows dead bodies. I was about to say,
oh yeah, he knows.
So if this man says it smells like decomp, it's decomp.
Yeah.
I don't care how long you haven't been a cop. Once you smell the dead body, that never goes away. I can smell that shit a mile away. Even the tow yard manager, Simon Birch, a man who had encountered several decomposing bodies during his time in the business, said the smell from Casey's car was consistent with those experiences.
Wonder how many mob hits he had to tow away.
Oh, and that in Florida, in Orlando.
Oh, the mob is he still huge in Florida, from the Cubans to the Italians.
And Orlando was a prime place, especially back in the 80s. Orlando had so much mob because, I mean, the water's right there. A lot of them own boats that they would take in. There's so many islands off of Florida that they can just, like, we have, like, just off of Orlando, there's small little islands that they're not even on a map.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
That are just there. You can just ride right to. We used to go party on them. So inside the car, George found a bag of trash in the trunk, decaying pizza, maggots, and other rotting food. But both George and Cindy insisted that the smell was too strong, too specific to be just trash. There was also Kaylee's belongings in the car, her backpack, a doll, and a car seat. The moment Cindy Anthony smelled the car, everything shifted. So to me, and this is the cop part of me, that Casey left this bag on purpose so that she could explain why the car smelled so bad. Because she does. Yeah. She said, oh, it was the trash that was in there. I'm sorry. I've smelled both things. It smelled vastly different.
And if I remember right, the backpack, the doll, and the car seat were all in the trunk of the car. They weren't in the back seat.
Yeah. So Cindy confronted Casey at Tony Lazzaro's apartment and brought her back to the house. What happened next was a turning point, not just for the family, but for the nation. That night, Cindy placed 3 911 calls. In the first, she simply asked for police assistance to remove her daughter from the home. In the second, her tone was more urgent. She reported that her granddaughter, Kayde, had been missing for 31 days. By the third call, Cindy's voice broke. It smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car, she said, clearly shaken. I remember this phone call. This went public too.
Yeah.
This phone call was, you could hear the shakiness in her voice. I didn't hear the first two, but the third one went public. I think
the first two didn't go public, but this last one did.
I believe so.
Or this is the most famous one that everybody just remembers as this third phone call. Because I can't imagine. Because Cindy would also probably know what human decomp was.
Oh yeah, she's a nurse.
Especially if she worked in a hospice, she would every day she's going and she's smelling death.
Yeah, so both her, the tow yard guy, and George are all saying it smells like human decomp. Most likely human decomp.
Yeah, I mean, you need forensics to double check that there had been human decomposed human remains in there. But yeah, you have 3 unofficial experts who have encountered saying, "Yep, there's a dead body in here."
Yeah, and I can't imagine as like a mother or a grandmother smelling that and
oh god, that would be
knowing that
was probably my grandchild.
That was my grandchild probably in the back. Like, what the fuck?
I think this is. Okay, stop it there.
Yeah, that's the sound of a woman who with reality basically hitting her all at once like a freight train, in my opinion. Yeah, granddaughter's missing. Her daughter is I probably wouldn't be surprised at that point. I think Cindy Anthony realized, I think my daughter just killed her daughter.
I think both Cindy and George realized that.
Yeah, just because, and the smell and everything. Oh God, and
because she couldn't even really get her address out.
No, because again, we just heard, she's like, oh my God, reality is hitting.
Because that was hard. Like I know I've listened to it before, but I haven't listened to it in years.
I've actually never heard that before.
I think it was released during the trial. My mom, if I remember right, my mom watched a lot of the trial.
Yeah. So, so again, in the first, she simply asked for police assistance to remove her daughter from the home. In the second, her tone was more urgent. She reported that her granddaughter Kaylee had been missing for 31 days. By the third call, Cindy's voice broke. Smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car, she said, clearly shaken, like we heard. When the 911 dispatcher asked to speak with Casey, she calmly told them that Kaylee had been kidnapped by her longtime babysitter, Zenaida Gonzalez. It was the first time law enforcement heard the name. In less than 24 hours, Casey Anthony was arrested for child neglect and providing false statements. The case of a missing 2-year-old in Orlando exploded into the national spotlight, but beneath the media storm, one chilling fact remained. For 31 days, Casey Anthony had not reported her daughter missing. For 31 days, no one had seen Kaylee. For 31 days, Casey lived as if nothing was wrong. The trial of lies, the missing child, the smell in the car, all of it pointed to something dark and irreversible. But the worst was still to come.
And it's sad because Kaylee was just like 2 months shy. Because I believe she was born in August of 2005, 2 months shy of 3 years old.
Yeah, she would be almost 20 years old now. The evening of July 15th, 2008 began with tension and ended with the ignition of a national firestorm. That night, Cindy Anthony, the woman who had been lied to for over a month by her daughter, reached a breaking point. It was not just the absence of her granddaughter Kaylee that tore through her, it was the smell, the lies, the sheer weight of knowing something was very, very wrong, and finally acknowledging it out loud. Earlier that day, George and Cindy Anthony had picked up their Pontiac Sunfire from the tow yard, the same car Casey had been using. From the moment George opened the door, the horrific stench from the trunk had hung in the air like a cloud they couldn't unsee or unsmell. Cindy, a former nurse, immediately recognized the odor of decomposition. George, a former law enforcement officer, tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just trash. Maybe food had gone bad. But their instincts told them otherwise. Again, two people very familiar with death.
So yes, this is a lot of repeated information, but this does go more in depth into everything.
Later that day, Cindy managed to track Casey down at Tony Lazzaro's apartment and brought her back to the family home. The confrontation was tense, fueled by weeks of suspicion. Casey was evasive, offering more of the same scripted responses. Kaylee was with Zanny the nanny. Feel like that's like a dumb superhero.
That's probably what it was.
No, Zanny was a real person.
Oh,
yeah.
There was a real friend, but
it wasn't a friend. It wasn't a friend.
It was not.
Who they said
it was not a nanny. Everything was fine, but Cindy was done believing. She demanded to know where Kaylee was. Casey's response stunned her. She admitted she hadn't seen her daughter for 31 days. The acknowledgement sent Cindy spiraling into panic, and that panic spilled into 3 chilling phone calls to 911. I could not imagine if I was a grandparent, and I wish I could get my mom on this call to see how she would feel. If I had not seen my grandchild, who I spent every day with, for 31 days, and then to find out, "Oh yeah, she's been missing the whole time." I would just break. I'd be done. The first call came in at 8:44 p.m. Cindy's voice was controlled but tight. She told the dispatcher she needed assistance to remove her daughter from the home, accusing Casey of stealing a car and money. At this point, the disappearance of Kaylee had not yet been disclosed. But beneath the request was a deep undercurrent of frustration. A woman at the end of her rope trying to contain a domestic crisis that had spiraled beyond her control. Cindy didn't yet reveal the most explosive piece of information, but she was inching toward it. The operators took the call seriously, but had no idea what was about to unfold.
I don't think at that point, like, honestly, like, from my perspective, that she necessarily knew that Kaylee disappeared. She was probably just getting frustrated with Casey. And she's like, well, I'm going to call 911.
She hadn't admitted to it yet.
Yeah.
When the first call came in, Casey hadn't admitted to anything yet. She was just aggravated that because there was more lies and more lies and more lies. So at 8:52 p.m., 8 minutes later, Cindy made her second call. This time there was no filter. "I found out my granddaughter had been taken. She's been missing for a month," Cindy said, her voice breaking. Her mother finally admitted that she's been missing. The dispatcher asked why she hadn't reported it sooner. Cindy, clearly flustered and overwhelmed, explained that she had just learned the truth. The pieces of the lie were collapsing in real time, and Cindy was barely holding on. What struck many later about this call was the palpable betrayal in Cindy's voice. She sounded not only panicked, but also stunned, like she was still trying to reconcile the fact that the daughter she had thought she knew had deceived her so completely. The lie wasn't just about a missing child. It was about a fabricated world, a sustained illusion that had now come crashing down. The dispatcher pressed for details. When had Cindy last seen Kaylee? Where had Casey said she'd been? What's the child's date of birth? Cindy provided answers between gasps. The dispatcher could tell this wasn't a typical missing person case. This had weight, the kind of weight that sets off alarms up the chain.
I mean, because think about it. This is usually every police, both federal and state, and local, we all know what to do when a child is missing. We all know what to do. Okay, everyone fan out, get the search parties going, because the first 24 hours are the only hours that you have to have any chance of finding the child alive. And now you're hearing like, okay, I got to do this. How long's it missing? Oh, it's been a month. Well, in his mind, in the mind, they're probably like, well, fuck.
Yeah.
Forget that idea. That's nothing you can do unless, I mean, yes, there's been instances of people who have been taken and wind up alive. I'm not saying it's happened.
But that's very far and few between.
Exactly. And usually it's always been someone who's older. I believe, what was it? One case, Elizabeth Smart. She was abducted and I think she was missing for months until finally I don't remember. She either escaped or they arrested the person holding her on something else and then discovered her.
Yeah. Minutes after the second call, a third and final 911 call came in. This one has since become iconic and haunting. Cindy's voice was now shaken and raw. "There's something wrong," she said. "I found my daughter's car today and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car." That line stunned the dispatcher. It would also become one of the most heavily analyzed and repeated statements of the entire case. Was it a mother misspeaking in panic, or was it a mother making a clear accusation? The power of that moment lay in what wasn't said. Cindy didn't say who she thought had been in the trunk. She didn't outright accuse Casey, not yet, but the implication was there, sharp as a blade. When the dispatcher asked to speak with Casey, the tone shifted again. What followed next was, to many, one of the most unsettling elements of that night. Casey Anthony took the phone. Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. No tremble, no desperation. She explained that Kaylee had been kidnapped 31 days ago by her nanny, Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. She claimed she hadn't reported it because she had been looking for her on her own. The contrast between Cindy's raw panic and Casey's almost detached demeanor was stark. The dispatcher pressed her for more. Why hadn't she called the police earlier? Where had she looked? Why was she only reporting it now? Casey stuck to her story. It was a pattern she had mastered, offered just enough detail to sound plausible, but not enough to lead to anything tangible. In just a few minutes, the dispatcher had all the red flags: a child missing for 31 days, a mother who hadn't reported it, and a car that may have held a dead body. The system mobilized fast. So, let's see. Hold on. So that, I believe that call happened almost close to 9. By 10 p.m., the Orange County Sheriff's Office deputies were at the Anthony home. Casey was taken in for questioning almost immediately, and her story began to fall apart within hours. Yes. And I know a few Orange County deputies. I actually was going to work for them, and they don't fucking play around.
So the second call was placed at 8:52.
The third was a few minutes later.
Minutes after the second. So let's assume like 5 minutes before 9.
Then by the time the call's done, that's about 9 p.m.
Yep.
And then they're here within the hour. She took investigators to Sawgrass Apartments, where she claims Anita lived. But when they arrived, the apartment was vacant. Records showed no such person had ever lived there. Still, Casey stuck to the narrative. She insisted she worked at Universal Studios and could show them her office. The following day, detectives humored her. They followed her to Universal. She walked through security with confidence. She greeted employees she didn't recognize. She led them down a hallway and then turned around and admitted she didn't work there. Even when cornered, Casey wouldn't budge from the core of her story. Kaylee had been taken and she was trying to get her back, but investigators were now certain she was lying. And if I can find the footage of that, we will also post it, but I will post the audio here. If the audio is not here, then we can find it. So I will try and find that video because I remember seeing it.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing a video like that too.
The next day, news of the case began spreading through Orlando and all of Florida. By the following week, it was a national story. The facts alone were explosive. A toddler missing for a month, a young mother who had failed to report it, and a smell in the car that could not be ignored. For many, Cindy Anthony's 911 calls became emblematic of a public cry for justice. The moment the case was ripped from private tragedy and placed into the hands of the nation. Those calls would later be played at trial, analyzed by pundits, and dissected by juries and journalists. But on that night, they were something more raw. The sound of a grandmother realizing she may never see her granddaughter again, and a mother confronting the awful possibility that her own daughter might be responsible.
And the fact that you raised a sociopath.
Yeah. Which, of course, is not her fault.
It's not.
No, of course
Casey
not.
Anthony's just the biggest piece of shit in the world. The moment Casey Anthony's story was introduced to the world, it didn't just capture public interest, it ignited a storm of outrage, disbelief, and a morbid fascination. What began as a missing persons case became almost overnight a cultural phenomenon. The story had everything that triggered the public psyche: a missing child, a young, seemingly indifferent mother, and a family narrative riddled with contradictions. But what pushed this case beyond local headlines was the way the public began to see and judge Casey Anthony. Within 48 hours of the 911 calls, the Casey Anthony case had become a staple on national television. Networks like CNN, Fox News, and HLN turned their daily programming into rolling coverage of every twist and turn. Anchors like Nancy Grace, whose show became synonymous with the case, framed the narrative early on and firmly. I cannot stand Nancy Grace.
Most people can't.
From the start, Grace and other pundits referred to Kaylee's mother as Top Mom, a nickname that became a loaded label. It would have been so funny if she joined TikTok and made her thing Top Mom. So to many, it painted Casey as a flippant, careless, and unfit, the kind of person who partied while her daughter was missing. This branding stuck. The media, with its relentless repetition of certain images and phrases, began to create a character out of Casey, one that bore little resemblance to how she had presented herself before the arrest, which pissed her off. Footage surfaced of Casey in the weeks after Kaylee's disappearance, attending nightclubs, drinking shots, smiling for cameras, even getting a tattoo that read Bella Vita, beautiful life, across her shoulder. These images, broadcast over and over, were seared into public memory. In a case lacking physical evidence early on, these visual impressions filled the vacuum and shaped the growing fury. And she, because of those videos, going into that trial, she was at a disadvantage already.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she's already been convicted in the court of public opinion. I mean...
And that's what matters the most. Like, our justice system is garbage. So, I honestly wish that somebody would have taken care of the issue. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so controversial in Orlando. They had to change jurisdictions just to hopefully get a fair trial.
Yeah.
Yeah. By late July 2008, the tone of public discourse had fully turned. Internet forums, blog posts, and cable news shows were unanimous in their condemnation. Social media, then still in its explosion, lit up with calls for justice, outrage at Casey's perceived lies, and deep emotional investment in Kaylee, the innocent face of the story. And so people have really moved away from Facebook now a lot, but 2008 Facebook was huge.
It was really the only thing. Facebook had...
MySpace had died years before that. For those that don't know, we had a thing called MySpace.
It was awesome.
It was better than Facebook. We need to bring it back.
Yeah, it
technically exists again.
In 2008, it was like a combination between MySpace and Facebook, but Facebook was
growing.
Yeah,
vastly growing compared to MySpace.
I know there was in order to stay in contact for the most part when I was leaving in August of 2008 from Lackland, most people were still handing out their MySpace information, not their Facebook stuff.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I remember once I got done, I kind of, when you're in the military training, Kayde and Pam will verify this. You kind of more or less live in a bubble.
Yeah, you don't hear the national headlines. You don't hear, like, unless it's something like massive, like 9/11, stuff like that.
That they would tell you, but
yeah, but something like this, they wouldn't even talk about because
you would not know about it unless, for some reason, you overheard the drill instructors talking about it. Because, of course, they live a normal life.
Yeah.
And some of them go home and all of that. So our drill instructor had a fucking TV in his room, and we could hear it at night, and it pissed us off.
Yeah. You know he did that on purpose too. But
I don't even think he watched it because it sounded like fucking soap operas. Oh, God. I think he just played it just to fuck with us.
But I do remember once I went home for my leave en route, you see everything. I'm just like, what the heck? And then, but again, it's like coming in the middle of a show after almost to the halfway point. I'm like, this is horrible. I hope this woman gets hanged from the public square, but I didn't. In many ways, I'm also learning a lot about this too, because I'm just like, oh wow, God, this actually happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew a little bit about the case, but I was a junior in high school. I had more important things.
Why did you have to bring that up?
I was a sophomore in high school.
I can't say nothing mean about you, but fuck you. Making me feel old.
So, April 2008, Facebook surpassed MySpace. And then May 2009, Facebook was the leading number.
Mm-hmm.
So this was the fall of MySpace, beginning of Facebook, where MySpace was nice because there was no ads.
Yeah.
It was just your friends. You could piss off your friends by changing your top 5. And that's how I learned how to code. The Anthony home became a focal point of community backlash. Protesters gathered outside with signs that read "Justice for Kaylee" and "Baby Killer lives here." Some carried megaphones chanting into the night. Others brought stuffed animals and candles, turning the front lawn into an uneasy mix of memorial and protest site. The spectacle grew larger with each passing day. Local law enforcement had to erect barricades and monitor the neighborhood for crowd control. Cindy and George Anthony, still grappling with their granddaughter's disappearance and the growing scrutiny of their own daughter, were forced to live under siege. For every camera trained on Casey, another was trained on her parents. Their home became a reality show set, a place where every grimace, every tear, every silence was interpreted as either complicity or denial. Public frustration grew in part because Casey's story didn't just strain credulity, it openly defied it. She insisted that Kaylee had been taken by her nanny, Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, yet there was no evidence such a person existed. The name Zenaida Gonzalez did belong to a real person, a woman who had briefly visited Sawgrass Apartments the same day Casey claimed the nanny had lived there. But she had no connection to the Anthony family, no relationship with Kaylee, and was unknowingly thrust into the middle of the most infamous case in America. Zenaida would later sue Casey for defamation, but at this moment in 2008, her name became another flashpoint in the case. To the public, this was just another brick in the wall of deception. How could a mother fabricate a detailed backstory for someone who never existed and maintain the lie with so much conviction? Experts began to weigh in. Criminologists, psychologists, and body language analysts were regular guests on cable news, offering insights into Casey's behavior. Many pointed to her lack of visible grief, her calm during the interviews, and her frequent dishonesty as markers of deception. Others cautioned that emotion is not always visible, that people process trauma differently, but that nuance didn't stick.
I will say, though, there is a case of where somebody who didn't act with emotion did convict her, both in the court and in the eyes of public opinion, and it turned out she was innocent. You may not have heard of it. You probably did. It was in Australia, the dingo ate my baby.
Yeah.
So just a brief touch on it. A church group in Australia went out into the outback for like a church retreat, camping trip. And the one lady, I don't remember her name, her and her husband brought their newborn daughter out camping. Now, at one point in the middle of the night, apparently she started crying out, "Oh my God, a dingo killed my baby." And the baby went missing. And no one believed them.
Lindy and Michael Chamberlain.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. So,
the daughter was Azaria.
Yeah. They
9 weeks old, by the way.
No.
Yeah.
Why would okay?
Because at that point in time, most people in Australia just never thought a dingo could do that. They knew about, obviously.
No, what I'm saying is, why would you bring a 9-week-old on
this is
trip?
Australia.
It's Australian. Plus, this wasn't like a camping trip like we, splitting log. This is like
they were in the Australian outback.
Yeah, this was
but
a glam.
Still.
This was like a glamping trip. There were tents, there were trailers.
It's a penal colony. This is what they do.
But
and it's also the 80s.
Yeah. My point though is that when they interviewed her, because again, Australian police were like, "A dingo killed your baby," and during the interviews in public, she appeared to have very little emotion. She was very matter of fact about everything happening. Yes, my daughter was killed, and people were like, "That bitch is guilty because she doesn't care that her daughter was killed." Supposedly, I think everyone made their mind up that she was guilty, and she, people brought up postpartum depression and all kinds of stuff as to why she killed her infant. And then she was convicted. She went to jail for a bit, but it was later found out, hey, the dingo actually did kill the baby. They found a dingo. Yeah,
okay.
It was.
Which we won't go into too much detail because that's a case we'll cover because it's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she got arrested in 1982. She was convicted. 2012 is when they found the evidence and she was released.
Yeah.
Damn.
20 years.
Yeah. But what hurt her, most people
30 years. Sorry.
Most people agreed that hurt her was the fact that she was so calm about it. Everybody was expecting. I mean, how would you react if your 9-month-old just got carted away and killed?
Not 9 month, 9 week.
9 week. Oh yeah, 9 week. 9-week-old baby was carted off by a wild animal and killed, but she appeared to just be like, oh, that's horrible.
I think it was more that she was probably stunned and didn't know how to react.
And people who knew her said it was very much like she was just a very reserved person. In private, she is devastated. She is emotional, but out in public, she was always taught to have a stoic appearance.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, this didn't help her.
We'll do the Dingo Ate My Baby case. Because that line became synonymous. It's now been in Seinfeld, Simpsons. Like it's.
Oh yeah.
A Dingo Ate My Baby is now iconic. Unfortunately, it's from a bad thing, but it's now one of the most used lines. So we'll do that case at some point. So the narrative that gained traction was that Casey Anthony didn't behave how a grieving mother should, and that, in the court of public opinion, was enough to render a verdict. People were particularly disturbed by the dichotomy between the gravity of Kaylee's disappearance and the casual, almost indifferent demeanor Casey displayed in jailhouse phone calls and videos. In one call, she famously told her mother that she saw no point in crying because it wouldn't change anything. She complained about being in jail more than she asked about the search for her daughter. In another call, she snapped at her brother for not bringing her Tony Lazzaro's phone number. These moments, played on TV again and again, painted a picture of selfishness, not sorrow. Now, I will say, we talked about the whole, her attitude and not showing emotion. I could see that if, for those 31 days, she didn't go fucking party. That's the big difference between the two. That the dingo mother didn't go party.
No, she was
She reported it immediately.
Oh, yeah.
And all of that. She didn't wait 31 fucking days.
Yeah, it was very immediately. She was with her husband, and
he was convicted too, by the way. The husband was convicted for accessory.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
I mean,
he got off, obviously, too.
Yeah. I mean, but there's just the big contract difference is that the Chamberlains were a very well-to-do Christian household in Australia. Yes, they were 7-day Adventist, and a lot that actually, believe it or not, played a part in their conviction too.
Yes, it did.
But they were still a respectable couple in their community. Casey and Anthony
is a piece of shit.
It's a piece of shit.
Where the couple probably stayed home mourning the loss of their daughter.
Yes, they did. They did everything.
They never
right.
left their home.
They did
versus Casey.
Right.
Where
she just partied for 31 days.
Yeah.
Hey, no kid. Yay.
And lying about where her daughter was.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's a difference. And they're similar in the sense of their nonchalant, perceived nonchalant attitude buried them, but there's a difference. The Chamberlains were innocent. Casey Anthony is not.
Yeah, they're so in August 2008, California bounty hunter and media personality Leonard Padilla entered the scene with a dramatic gesture. He posted Casey's $500,000 bail, hoping that freedom might compel her to tell the truth or at least lead police to Kaylee's location. Padilla arrived with a signature cowboy hat and a flair for spectacle. He told reporters that he believed Casey might be holding on to critical information, and he was there to help find Kaylee. So Leonard Padilla, he actually sued Casey Anthony. I believe for that $500,000, if I remember right. But like he still has a bail bonds in California. So he's 85 now. But
I'm sorry.
I'm sure he doesn't do it himself anymore.
I'm sorry. I've always thought of bounty hunting as like a joke.
That's him.
Yeah, it's a joke profession these days, because how many times has bounty hunters gone and done something so ridiculously stupid? I think I saw, I think it was a couple of years ago, a couple of bounty hunters were looking for somebody in Arizona. Somebody posted on their webpage, hey, go to this address. He was last seen there. They went in there, kicked the door in, and handcuffed the dude in his bed. Turns out it's the Phoenix, it's either Phoenix or Tucson, but one of those cities' chief of police.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, you dumbasses.
Yeah. Just leave it to dog. Let Dog do it, because at least he does it right most of the time.
He's an idiot, too.
Yeah. But Padilla's optimism quickly turned to disillusionment. Casey showed no signs of helping in the investigation. She resumed her silence, offered no new leads, and in Padilla's words, appeared more concerned with her comfort than her child. Just 8 days after posting bail, Padilla revoked it, calling the effort a failure. She didn't want to talk, he said bluntly. His reversal made headlines and reinforced the public's perception that Casey had no interest in cooperating. And like I said, I believe that Padilla sued her in like 2011 for that money.
He's an idiot. And this is a case where I kind of hope the judge threw the suit out, because how stupid can you be? I'm sorry, but how stupid can you be?
While Casey had become a lightning rod for anger, sympathy surged for Kaylee. Images of the wide-eyed toddler in her pink and white outfits began in candlelight vigils, bumper stickers, and online memorials. Across the country, strangers sent teddy bears and flowers addressed to baby Kaylee. What was beginning to take shape was more than just a high-profile case. It was a national mourning ritual. Kaylee became the symbol of innocence lost, and the case around her became the prism through which America confronted uncomfortable questions about motherhood, justice, and media responsibility. By September 2008, Casey Anthony had become the most hated woman in America. This wasn't just about suspicion of guilt. It was about betrayal of expectations. Society holds a deeply ingrained image of what a mother should be: protective, nurturing, self-sacrificing. Casey didn't match any of those archetypes. Instead, she was perceived as selfish, cold, deceptive, and even predatory. The backlash wasn't limited to the public. Jurors would later admit that they tried not to watch coverage, but it was nearly impossible to avoid. The emotions surrounding the case began to bleed into every arena: legal, political, and cultural. Lawmakers began drafting proposals like Kaylee's Law, which would make it a felony for a parent not to report a missing child within 24 hours, which it did. Media ethics panels debated whether the saturation of coverage had compromised the right to a fair trial. And legal scholars warned that when the public pressure replaces due process, justice becomes a spectacle.
And we'll go more in depth in Kaylee's Law in a couple episodes.
But for the most Americans in the summer of 2008, those nuances didn't matter. To them, the case was already solved. The trial, they believed, would just confirm what they already knew. By late summer 2008, the disappearance of Kaylee Anthony had evolved from a criminal investigation into a full-blown cultural crisis. For the residents of Orlando, especially those and around East Orange County, the case was no longer a story confined to television screens. It was playing out in their front lawns, disrupting their neighborhoods, invading their sense of safety, and dividing their community. The Anthony family's quiet suburban street became ground zero for a public reckoning. Central Florida was no longer watching the storm, it was inside it. Every day, dozens of cars pulled into Hope Spring Drive. Some came with cameras and microphones, others came with signs, chants, and shouts of anger. Some brought balloons and stuffed animals for Kaylee. Others came with fists clenched and curses ready. Protesters staked out the Anthony home at all hours, turning the family's modest yard into an uneasy mix of protest zone, crime scene, and pilgrimage site. Neighbors had never seen anything like it. This was a quiet community full of retirees and working families. The kind of neighborhood where people exchanged greetings on walks and left porch lights on for one another. That peace evaporated. Media trucks parked curbside. Helicopters hovered overhead. News anchors set up temporary studios a few blocks from the Anthony's home. Protesters clashed with supporters. Residents complained of blocked driveways, disrupted sleep, and threats from strangers. What had once become a silent cul-de-sac was now surrounded by anger, suspicion, and constant noise. The people who gathered on Hope Spring Drive weren't just locals. Many traveled from other parts of Florida and beyond, drawn to the case by their own sense of moral urgency. To them, Casey Anthony represented something larger than one criminal investigation. She embodied a perceived betrayal of motherhood, a failure of justice, and an abuse of community trust. What began as candlelight vigils for Kaylee soon turned into confrontations. Some protesters held up signs that read, "Murderer lives here. Where's Casey?" or worse, Kaylee, or no justice, no peace. Others chanted baby killer and liar towards the house. Several were arrested for disorderly conduct. On more than one occasion, things turned violent. Someone broke a window, another threw a brick. One man was arrested for bringing a baseball bat. In the emotionally charged environment, even neighbors were targeted. If someone was seen speaking to George or Cindy Anthony, they risked being called a sympathizer. Fights broke out. Police were called regularly. It was no longer just about Casey. The entire neighborhood was under siege. Inside the Anthony household, the tension was mounting. George and Cindy were under immense pressure from law enforcement, the public, and increasingly from each other. Cindy had remained firm in her belief that Casey was protecting someone or something. She defended her daughter publicly, stating again and again that Kaylee was alive. Cindy gave interviews where she insisted her granddaughter had been kidnapped. She accused the media of twisting the truth. She placed missing persons flyers around town and appeared on national TV urging for Kaylee's safe return. George, on the other hand, was beginning to crack. A former homicide detective, this is his bread and butter, and a man with decades of law enforcement training, George recognized what many refused to admit. The signs pointed to a tragic ending. In private, he expressed doubts. In jailhouse visits with Casey, there were moments when George appeared to be searching desperately for the truth. But the burden was too much. Just 6 months later, he would attempt suicide in a Daytona Beach motel, unable to reconcile the pain of what was unfolding around him. He was not successful.
No, he wasn't.
Isn't he still alive?
Yes.
Yeah.
So obviously
he did not try it again after that. He definitely hit his breaking point, which it happens.
Oh,
I mean,
this kind of thing.
This is a former cop who can't solve the case of his granddaughter being missing.
I think in this case, I don't think this is just my opinion. I don't think he wanted to. Only because he then has to really face the reality.
My daughter's a piece of shit.
And probably either in best case, she knows what happened, but for whatever reason, just will not say what happened. Or very worst case is she just straight up did it and she straight up killed him, and I raised a sociopathic murderer.
The Anthony home was no longer just a family residence. It was a place of psychological implosion. The press, the protesters, the investigators, the neighbors, they were all pressing in. And inside, the family was collapsing under the weight of conflicting beliefs, secrets, and shame. Local residents were not just irritated, they were emotionally fatigued. Many reported increased anxiety, sleeplessness, and fear. Children were kept indoors. Mail was disrupted. Neighborhoods watch groups formed to deal with the chaos. Block parties were canceled. Some neighbors even sold their homes, unwilling to live in what had effectively become a crime scene. The community's anger was not only directed at the Anthony family. It was also aimed at the media, which they saw as feeding the fire. News vans clogged traffic. Journalists camped in yards. Satellite dishes were mounted without permission. Reporters asked invasive questions. The privacy of an entire zip code had been violated. At town meetings, community members voiced their frustration. They asked law enforcement to clear the street, to protect the residents, to do something, anything to restore order. But there was no easy solution. The investigation was active, the public was enraged, and the media knew that every moment of the chaos translated into higher ratings. Part of what made the community response so visceral was that the crime, or what they believed to be a crime, had occurred in a place they thought was safe. Suburban Central Florida was supposed to be protected from the kind of horrors seen in inner cities or dramatized on cable crime shows. But the Casey Anthony case shattered that illusion. This wasn't just a story about drugs or gangs or strangers. It was about a young mother and a toddler, a family who lived on a tree-lined street, and a tragedy that unfolded behind the walls of a neatly manicured home. That kind of narrative pierced the comfort of suburbia, and it made people afraid, not just of what happened, but what might happen next. It also revealed something deeper, the fragility of the American myth of the ideal family. The Anthonys had all the outward signs of normalcy, but behind closed doors, things were anything but stable. The community saw in them a mirror, and what reflected back was unsettling. Mental health professionals in the area noted an increase in community stress. Therapists reported a spike in clients dealing with secondary trauma, particularly among parents of young children. Teachers saw changes in student behavior. One local pastor commented that his congregation was asking deeper, more painful questions about trust, family, and faith. Some tried to reclaim peace through collective action. Churches held vigils, support groups formed for families coping with missing children. Local leaders attempted to restore calm by redirecting energy toward constructive forms of mourning, organizing fundraisers, charity walks, and awareness campaigns. Still, the tension never fully lifted. Until there were answers or a body, the unrest would continue. As weeks turned into months and Kayde Anthony remained missing, Central Florida found itself pulled into a vortex of suspicion, grief, and anger. The street where the Anthony family lived was no longer just a suburban block. It had become a symbol of loss, of confusion, of a justice system that seemed to be moving too slowly for a public desperate for resolution. Neighbors were divided. Protesters camped out day and night. Journalists rolled footage of a family breaking apart in real time. The case had morphed from a missing child report into a reflection of national anxieties. Who gets justice? Who decides the truth? And how do we react when justice doesn't look like we expected? Inside the Anthony home, pressure continued to mount. Outside, the noise never stopped. And yet, through it all, Kaylee's body was still nowhere to be found. The community was on edge. The nation was watching, but law enforcement was not standing still. While protesters shouted on sidewalks and pundits speculated on television, forensic scientists and investigators were quietly working in labs and evidence rooms, compiling a case they hoped would speak louder than any protest sign ever could. So, next time, we leave the crowds outside and step into the evidence locker. From microscopic particles to chemical anomalies, from an unassuming car trunk to an overlooked patch of the woods, the investigation begins to pivot. And the question emerges, can science uncover what so many emotions cannot? So, this is just part one of 4 parts. But so far, thoughts, especially you, Ben, who didn't really dig into the case before.
Well, I mean, even if I didn't already know just from the highlights of seeing it from all these years after, I would say she probably killed her daughter. And I think, I don't know how it happened. I think everything, none of this strikes me as, I hate my daughter, I must kill her. Like, was there ever any evidence of physical abuse?
Nope.
So this really strikes me as something happened to the girl. And it could be anything. She could have choked on a Pop-Tart. She could have gone into a pool at somebody's house and drowned accidentally. Either way, this child is dead. What do I do? I'm going to throw her in the trunk. Why? Because probably, again, I already think, I think this person is a narcissistic sociopath who just generally just doesn't really care. Her daughter's dead. Throw her in the trunk. I'll deal with her later. I'm going out with Tony, whatever. Tony later to the club. Tony Lazaro. I'm going out with Tony, and we're going to get and do this, and that. It really genuinely would not surprise me if she just forgot that her daughter's body was in that car until, like, oh, what's that smell? Oh, yeah, now I get it. That is what
I'm Tony, I need your family to dispose of a body.
He's an art. No self-respecting wise guy's family will let his kid go to an art school. But that's what I kind of just get the feeling. I don't feel, everyone was like, she murdered her daughter. From certain angles, I can see how you can believe that, but a lot of this just points of, no, I think the daughter died, but I think she just didn't care. Something probably happened. Kaylee died of some cause, be it accident or whatever. And she just like, all right, wrap it up, throw it in the trunk. I'll deal with it later.
My opinion, I think there's a couple possibilities. This is Florida. There's pools everywhere. And this is what a lot of people believe. They believe that Kaylee drowned somewhere and that Casey then covered that up. The other possibility is that I think that something happened and Casey got frustrated. Crime of passion. She got frustrated. Hey, stop doing this, stop doing this, stop doing this. Shake, 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 shake. Boom. Dead.
And that's why I asked about if there was any history or
there wasn't that we know
of a physical abuse of her losing her temper. Because if there wasn't, I just don't. I'm not saying it's not, again.
But in a drunken stupor. She's a party animal.
And this is the problem. We don't have a body to work with.
Well, and that's the other thing, too. How do we know she didn't come? She wasn't left at home. Here's the other thing. Again, party animal. She leaves Kaylee at home by herself, wherever they're staying, at Tony's apartment, whatever. Guarantee it's not baby proof.
Yeah.
She leaves the apartment, goes out, parties, comes back.
Kaylee's dead,
drowned in the bathtub, or a bookcase fell on her. Something happened. She died at the apartment by herself, or she went on a 3-4 day party binge, and unfortunately, the worst case, she starved to death.
Yeah, I mean,
there's that Ohio case. Was it Ohio? Mm-hmm. With the 16-month-old? I think it was 16. It was.
I feel like, though, that something like that, of her just leaving the child and like abandoning, I feel like whatever the cause of death was, I still lean towards something accidental, something that would not, because the problem is, if it's at Tony Lazzaro's apartment, we're just going to use his apartment because that's where they were in a relationship and that's where she was with him. I feel like that if a child had been left there to starve or whatever, somebody's going to hear a crying child. Somebody will hear it.
It doesn't, but that doesn't mean anything. Children cry all the time.
You're right, but again, if it's consistent, though.
No, it's not.
Well, no, because follow me on this. If there's nobody there, a mother or a father, kind of, oh shush, come on, honey, let's take care of it. But if it just keeps crying, somebody's going to be like, there's a kid in apartment 3C. It will not stop crying. No, I haven't heard any movement from the apartment. There's a thing child. I feel like that is. I feel like, though, whatever happened, the child, even if it was left alone, like you said, something happened in there. The kid she put her finger in the electrical socket. A bookcase fell on her. She choked eating some food that she found. Something that it was that when she was left alone, she wasn't alive for very much longer, and nobody noticed her until Casey came and found her. Or again, she was at some rando's house at a pool, and she drowned, which again begs the question: who else knew about this?
The most common belief is that Kaylee drowned in the family pool, and the entire family decided to cover it up.
That's what I think.
Not the grandmother. She was
no. I don't think Cindy knew. I don't think Cindy.
I think George helped cover it up.
I don't think Cindy or Lee knew. I think because George was the last one to see Kaylee, supposedly seeing Kaylee alive, besides Casey. Casey going to Tony's apartment that morning, and there's no evidence that Kaylee was with her. What happened to Kaylee at that point? If she's not with Casey. The other theory that I have is Casey's covering for a family member.
I don't think. I think if any family member was going to cover or help her, it would be George, just because of what we described. We described as his passive, just kind of goes with the flow and be very empathetic to his children and granddaughter. But here's the thing, though. This is a former homicide detective. Even if he was say he did had a help in it, I don't think there's anybody in that family who would be more qualified to help cover up a crime, especially a dead body, than a former homicide detective. If he helped dispose of the body, how does a homicide detective overlook such a glaring thing? That body, there is a smell of a cadaver in this car. Someone's going to discover this. This car is in my name or my wife's name or whatever. This car will lead back to me, and there is a dead body smell in here. I kind of believe that a former homicide detective knows I need to get rid of this car, not leave it abandoned and have it get towed. I mean, go to the Everglades, push it into a swamp, weigh it down, and my car was stolen. Oh no.
I don't necessarily believe it was George.
I don't think any of the family members had anything to do with it. Obviously outside of Casey.
So here's what I think, and it's one of the other things is murder. So whether intentional or negligent. Mm-hmm. It's believed that she regularly drugged Kaylee to keep her sedated while she partied using chloroform or something like that. I believe that she maybe overdosed her on it. Chloroform killed her. And here is why I believe that. Because in investigation, there were searches on Casey's computer, how to make chloroform and neck breaking, which we'll get into later. There was also obviously the decomp smell, but then there was duct tape found with Kaylee's remains
over her mouth.
So when they found the remains,
or no, it wasn't over her. There's speculation
found in the bag with her.
It was the impression they did not find any remains.
Oh yeah, they found her in a trash bag.
Yeah, so
we'll talk about that.
And we'll talk more about, but the duct tape, it was near her mouth. It was either over her mouth and it just fell off, or
it was near the front of the skull,
or it was to hold the jaw.
Yeah.
To the skull.
But yeah, so we'll get to that when we get to that part. But that's what we believe for now. We'll see if that changes as we go on. But we want to thank everybody for visiting the Scarlet Tavern. Please remember to turn in your glasses, push in your seat, and as always, tip the bard. Good night, everybody.
Good night.